All right. Hey, y'all, this is Trent Knox with the Trent Knox Show. Today we have Talking Shop with James O'Hagan. He's the host and curator of the Academy of Esports. We're going to be talking a lot about um, education and incorporating esports into high schools, colleges, technical schools, and things like that. And then in the back end of this podcast, we're going to be talking about some industry related things. I'm your host, Trent Knox, and today's guest again is James O'Hagan. Hey, James, can you say hello to the viewers?
Hey, Trent, thanks for having me.
And for those of you who are on the podcast and just listening in, a live stream currently has all of the social medias right below our photos, and then up at the top we have some more detailed information about how you can find the Academy of Esports. So I guess let's start off with the first question. What was the origin story behind the Academy of Esports?
Well, the Academy of Esports probably goes back about 20 years. So I was a residence hall counselor at Purdue University, and residence hall counselors, we're an odd bunch. We're peers, but we're not. We kind of see over and oversee the dorms and make sure that people aren't harming themselves or partying too much or anything like that or causing disruptions. And the way that I socially connected with a lot of the people on my floor was through StarCraft. And we played a lot of StarCraft that year. And fast forward a year to when I started teaching in schools. I was a fifth grade teacher for many years, so I taught fifth graders. And I started a gaming club. And actually, it was supposed to be a computer club or a technology club, but basically it morphed into a gaming club. And again, we used StarCraft as our main game to play. I mostly had boys. I did have some girls who came in as well to play. And what I noticed was that there were kids who were coming in not just to necessarily play the games, but they just wanted to hang out. They wanted to socialize with their friends. They wanted to connect with other people, and they were learning some technology stuff along the way too. Mm-hmm. So that's 1999, 2000. So we're talking a long time ago. That's when, QuakeCon was I think it was basically a new thing, and mm-hmm. StarCraft was just taking off in South Korea as kind of being a major thing. But you fast forward several years, and I've always been involved with education and technology in my career. So I went from being an elementary school teacher to getting my Cisco certification. So I was a CCNA and a CCNP licensed network admin. Worked for school districts as a network administrator and as a technology coach. And what we found was, as I'm going through this whole process of technology, was always trying to find ways to connect with kids authentically, to use it for more than just a really fancy spiral notebook, real digital notebook. And we've gone through this whole phase, I guess, in education of really trying to shoehorn in technology in ways that are comfortable for teachers, that teachers have been teaching ways for so long, and now we've been really trying to use technology not in really authentic ways that are meaningful to kids. They're not really constructionist in that sense. So it's still a lot of worksheets. What we were doing as worksheets are now games where you solve a problem and you give the answer. We're still asking kids to type papers, though we're doing a little bit better by asking kids to share with us so we can edit. But instead of getting back that rough draft from the teacher with all the red marks on it, now it's in a Google Doc. And what I started to notice is just that as I'm growing up, and now I'm 43 years old, mm-hmm. I grew up with video games, and I'm starting to notice that there's also adults who are my peers in education who are also playing video games. Mm-hmm. And so as we're moving through this, as I'm growing up into this field and getting older and getting positions of power now where I can actually say like, hey, we should do this. And they're like, yes, we should do that. It just so happens that I had a really odd conversation. It was like a right place, right time kind of thing. I was working for the Rockford Public Schools. This was back in about 2014. And an administrator came to me and he said, hey, did you watch?
Sorry, what school was that?
I was working for the Rockford Public School District at the time.
Okay.
I was the director of instructional technology for the district.
Okay.
And it was one of those, like I said, right place, right time conversations where I ran into one of the assistant superintendents and he says, hey, did you see on 60 Minutes the other night that they were giving out scholarships for esports? And I mm-hmm. said, no, I missed that story, but that sounds really cool. He goes, can you do some research into this? And of course, I've always thought about, saying, hey, why can't we have video games in schools? But it's almost one of those things you're scared to say as an educator, because it just sounds so nuts. It sounds absolutely crazy to say, hey, let's play video games in schools. But when I watched the story and I watched what Robert Morris University was doing, and Robert Morris University in relation to Rockford is about an hour east. So we're talking, this is a national story, but it's very local to us. And it was one of those stories that.
And this is Texas?
This is in Illinois.
Illinois.
Yeah. So Robert Morris University is just I think it's on the north side of Chicago. So Rockford is in about an hour straight west of there.
Okay.
And what was really fascinating about it was, again, right place, right time. I was working with my next person whose office is next to mine is the athletic director, and his name is Matt Parker. And Matt Parker, he sees himself, I think, more as an activities director than an athletic director. His goal was, I want to get something for kids that engages kids in a variety of different things. We don't want to just have our traditional sports. We want to try to go into things that are going to connect kids to their schools, because we know, and this is old data, this is nothing new, this is going on 30 something years, is that if you get a child involved in an extracurricular activity in their school, two things are really going to happen. Number one, their GPA is going to go up, and number two, their attendance is going to increase. Those are usually, I don't know what your high school experience was, but literally, if kids, high school should be almost to the point where if you show up and you engage basically in your high school classes, you should be able to pass high school. So knowing that, and knowing that the issues that we had in Rockford, where we have there was a horrible crime rate, there was not a high graduation rate, and the athletics were really suffering as well too, because the way that athletics work, and I don't know if this was your experience growing up, but if you're not making grades, you're kicked off the team. Mm-hmm. And with the crime situation and the poverty situation, Matt Parker made the decision to say, you know what, we're not going to kick kids off the team anymore. We're not going to punish them, because what are we doing when we kick kids off a team? We're sending them back to the streets. We're sending them back to a home where they don't have any parents. They don't have any adult involvement. And mm-hmm. So he actually said, we're going to get rid of the requirement that students are making grades for them to participate. Now, it didn't mean that they necessarily couldn't play in the games, but they weren't going to remove them from that environment. And, mm-hmm. and there's a long story to this. And the reason why there's a long story is because it all comes together here. Trust me. I hear people are probably going, what does this have to do with esports? But ESPN's Outside the Lines came back and said, look, you're doing something pretty radical. We want to study this. We want to learn more about this. And so ESPN, Bob Lee from Outside the Lines came out to Rockford Public Schools. They did a baseline study mm-hmm. to find out where the athletes' grades were. And then they came back 2 years later, because they said, we're going to come back 2 years later. And they did. And Matt opened up the books and showed them that, in fact, by not kicking kids off the teams, by including the kids in after school activities, they found that the graduation rates for those involved in athletics went up, mm-hmm. and their grades went up. So Matt's goal was to make sure that he had 51% of the student body in Rockford Public Schools involved in some kind of extracurricular activity. But you look at me, and if you're watching this on the live stream, I'm about 6'2", 250 pounds. In high school, I was about 300. I played offensive line and defensive line, and I didn't enjoy football. And it's hard to say, because my dad was on the freshman team at the University of Notre Dame. My grandfather played for the New York Giants, and it was something that I kind of felt like I had to do, but I really had no choice. And I came out of it with a busted neck. But if somebody had said to me, hey, we've got this video game team going on here at our school, would you be interested in doing this? I would have given up my helmet in a heartbeat. It wouldn't even have been a question about me doing it. So, what you get in schools is you have all these things that you can do, but you kind of hit a glass ceiling. And the glass ceiling comes very quickly, where you have things that are so traditional, but for a lot of kids, they don't connect with what is traditional. But what we know now is that Pew Research has shown that kids in the high school age range, 13 to 17, 97% of males identify as gamers, and 83% of females identify as gamers. Now imagine if you had that bit of information at your school, and that information was 97% of males enjoy playing basketball and 83% of females enjoy playing basketball. You would change your school in a heartbeat. You would
Mhm.
change the offerings and the way things were run in a heartbeat. And so, knowing this data now, when we came into this in 2014, we were really focused on, hey, let's get the kids playing games, let's get them, just together. And it was an easy start because there are a lot of kids who enjoy playing video games, but the problems then become, if you're just focusing on the games, you're losing out on this much bigger opportunity. Okay.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that is that you've got these kids who are very intrinsically motivated to play games. People may call it an addiction. I'm not saying that there isn't a bit of video game addiction out there, but an addiction would be something that harms your life. And for these kids, they don't see this as a harm to their life. They see it as something that is a positive to their life. Being able to do this, being able to socially connect with others. That what we call when an adult may call an addiction, I call is classic self-determination theory. It is intrinsic motivation. These are kids who are doing this because they want to do it, not because somebody told them they had to.
Mhm.
And for a lot of kids, school is done because they have to. And there are some kids who just play school better than others, some who take tests better than others. So when we started looking closely more at what we were doing in Rockford, we realized that we needed to kind of start to expand the offerings a little bit. Now, I got a job in the Racine Public Schools, so I moved from Rockford, Illinois to Racine, Wisconsin to be closer to family. And I started on this journey and this path again here. And I will say the journey and the path for me in the Racine Public Schools has been a little bit different. It's been a little more trying to explain to people what's going on, a harder sell in some cases, because there are still a lot of stereotypes around gamers. But what we got it down to was we're going to use video games and esports as a vehicle to get us to other things. And there's 5 things that we're really looking at doing when we're using esports in our schools.
Mhm.
Number one thing we want to do is we want to redefine athletic culture. Athletic
Mhm.
culture has been very divided along gender lines, along ability lines, even in some cases race lines. And we want to make sure that we're saying athletic culture doesn't have to be these pockets or these exclusive sort of things. So we want to do that.
Mhm.
We want to diversify opportunity for student participation. That's number 2, because we want to make sure that our kids have something in school that's going to connect them to this fabric of the school. So again, talking about that, once we get kids involved in things, graduation rates go up and attendance goes up. Number 3, we want to promote good mental and physical health. And people kind of look at me crazy-eyed when I talk about video games and good health, but it's interesting to have the conversation with somebody about video games from the perspective of, hey, if you really want to be good at this, guess what? You got to hydrate, you got to get good sleep, you got to get some exercise. You can't just sit there and do a gaming session for 6-10 hours.
Mhm.
And I guess we're gonna come talk about that a little bit later, the difference between what we're doing in schools and what a professional gamer may be. But the 4th thing is we want to increase collegiate and career scholarship pathways for kids. So there's college scholarships now coming out for esports, and the reason for that, in a short way of saying it, is schools want to diversify their student pools.
Mhm.
Colleges and universities right now are actually predominantly female, if you look at the demographics. So they're trying to
Mhm.
get more boys into school. And number 5, the thing that I love about this is we're honoring the importance of play. And it seems like we've taken all the play out of schools. All you got to do is, anybody can drive past their elementary school, right? And you can tell how important play is by just taking a look at the playground. Is the
Mhm.
playground cool looking, or is it something you would want to jump onto, or is it like the same thing that you were playing on as a little kid? So those are the things that we're trying to do with esports in education. Is we're not looking at the professional ranks and saying, hey, we're going to make all these kids professional gamers. What we're looking at is trying to really connect the kids into education like they haven't been connected before.
Mhm. And something I was thinking while you were talking there is,
Hmm.
where was the original pilot? Was it a high school or a junior high school?
So my original pilot, now there's been programs all over the United States, and then some people will say, oh, I had a varsity program back in this date, and whatever.
Mhm.
to me, that none of that really matters. We started our program in the Rockford schools back in 2014, and actually Matt Parker made it a big point to make sure that we dedicated this as a varsity event, a varsity sport. This was not going to be something club. He wanted to put an actual actual varsity behind this. So I think April of 2014 we started this as a varsity, but we were competing already against schools all over the Midwest. We were part of the High School Star League at the time, and you would compete against other schools based on your time zone. So that was kind of like how your conference was set up, was based on your time zone, and they would plug us into matches. And the one game that we were playing at the time was League of Legends. So, and it wasn't a big rollout, I guess you could say. We didn't, dedicate an arena or anything like that. We did buy gaming laptops. So we did have, I think there were Lenovo Yoga gaming laptops. And we used one of the meeting rooms, actually two of the meeting rooms in the library. So we had a varsity and a JV team, and they would just practice against each other. The team was all boys. And it's funny, a couple of weeks ago, one of the I guess federations, leagues, whatever you want, one of the national conferences, used a photo of mine. They didn't ask me, that became a whole other thing. But they used a photo of mine from that first day when we really got started. And I took a look at that photo and I messaged them and I said, I would like you to just take that photo down, please. And it wasn't just because they didn't ask, but it was 5 white male boys sitting around a table playing League of Legends. And the optics of that, while for many may just look at it and go, oh, that's fine, that's normal, it shouldn't be normal. Again, when we're looking at the demographics, how many boys and girls are considering themselves gamers, it doesn't have to be so much this way. And the other big part of this too is that $100 billion in scholarships that are coming up in the next 5 years. That's open to anybody. That's not just, boys or girls. That is anybody who's playing the games who can show that they can do it, can get access to that college scholarship money. And for some, that's going to be a make or break for whether they go to college or not.
Right. And so your role has been from the administrative level inside of the school district of these school districts, right?
So right now I oversee 5 high school esports programs, and it's funny. I'm kind of like, I feel like the Godfather when I walk into some of these places. It's like, and what we do differently in Racine than what I think other places do is, rather than us building gaming lounges or putting together computers at each of the 5 high schools, we actually have a great gaming lounge in town called Not Your Parents' Basement. It's a great name. Everybody loves it. The kids love going there. And we said, let's put all the kids at the same space and have them play together. And what's been really fun about that is seeing the relationships that kids have built with kids from other high schools who they may not have known, based around a game. And they still have their teams and they still have their own individual high school jerseys, but they all know each other. In fact, when we all went to the state championships, all the teams rode up together in the same bus. It's really, you wouldn't see that with football. You wouldn't see that with basketball. You wouldn't see it with softball. Cheerleading even gets their own buses. This has become very much a communal event, if you will.
And how is this being received by the faculty and teachers within these high schools? I
think that for some, the impact wasn't felt until they realized that we had, four Overwatch and 2 League of Legends teams go to state finals. We had one, I think, for Rocket League, and we had several kids for Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. And I don't think it was felt until they realized, oh my gosh, they're going to a state championship. And then while we had so many teams go to the state finals, we had one come back with a 2nd place finish, but they had that trophy up and they were recognized at the school. And I think also when kids started wearing their jerseys and they saw there were sponsorships from various businesses in town, I think that's when it started to sink in. But the parents didn't even understand this again until we really started taking them. We took several to the state finals. And I had one grandmother standing next to me while her grandson was in a semifinal for Super Smash Brothers Ultimate. And at one point, she just grips my arm and she turns to me and she goes, "This is so exciting." And I look back at her, I'm like, "I know it is." And it's like that moment that she got it. We had another kid whose parents weren't really sure what he was doing, but knew that he had a state tournament that day. And they got to come up and see this. And they went, "Oh my gosh, this is a big deal." Because we had schools from all over the state of Wisconsin at the state finals in Fond du Lac. So it's when people see it, I think when people hear about it, they don't believe it. But when they really see it, and it's not seeing it on a professional level or seeing it like, the Fortnite tournament that happened the last weekend, but when they get down to the intimacy of just how these kids are competing, and that this is more than just playing video games, this is actual practice, this is purposeful, there's growth mindset around this. This becomes something completely new to them in their eyes.
Right. So the organization of a regular school, the education, what is the word I'm looking for? Here, high school education, the organization of that.
So like our association or at the team level?
A bit of both. So from the tournament structure, what does that look like? Are you working within the same constraints as like the technical sports of our technical portions or curriculum within schools like Skills USA, or how do tournaments get organized through this process?
So there's a couple of organizations that we work with, and the main one that we operate from, and the one that we're a founding member of, our schools are a founding member of, is the Wisconsin High School Esports Association.
Okay.
And that was born out of a collective of educators across the state of Wisconsin, like myself, who really took a look at what there was being offered as far as the different leagues that were out there, nationwide leagues. So like High School Star League was one. I think they've gone away now. High School Esports League, Electronic Gaming Federation, Playverse. These are some of the players right now who are in the space, but there's others as well too. But we as educators don't see dollar signs on our kids. We don't see it as being a way to operate and to make money. We've also had instances where tournaments that are done with the best of intentions have let us down. And
sure, but don't you figure that, for the PTSA or the parents or teachers that are involved with this, don't they need to see brand equity within the tournament structure in order for their...
Well, I mean, with our students and with our competition, I mean, this is us we're not just at the grassroots just saying what this is, but what we're also, we have a seat at the table. I am the direct connection to the state association. In fact, I'm one of the board members for the state association. So the group, while small right now, and we have about 30 different high schools across the state, we just earned our nonprofit status. We do have full bylaws. And we're operating with the cost structure of being $100 for a year. And that's basically to cover our state championships. Where in some cases, some of these organizations are charging per student, per game, sometimes thousands of dollars per game. And when you're talking about, you talked about the equity issue. The equity issue is not something to be discounted here. The reason why we want to keep costs low is because we want to have as many kids at the table. We want to add seats. We want to make sure that, again, because you're talking $100 million in scholarships that's open to everybody, but the only way you're going to get access to it is by playing. We want to make sure that we're not cutting out schools that are in low income areas that have budget crises. In fact, Racine Unified School District, where I work, last year was when we expanded this, we had a $2 million budget deficit. This year we came up with an $11 million budget deficit, but we were able to allocate the funds because we were able to, instead of building out labs in the schools, we partnered with our gaming lounge in town. And unfortunately for a lot of people, they don't have a gaming lounge in town. So They're kind of trying to figure out how do they do this in their schools, and their IT departments don't necessarily see eye to eye on this, or administration doesn't necessarily see eye to eye on this. Right now, there's a lot of education that's being given because, again, we have to go push against stereotypes. But, by having a state association like ours that isn't like one of the branded ones, it's actually given us a lot of power and a lot of flexibility to make the best determinations for our own kids.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like the wild, wild west. I mean, of situations. Everybody's trying to make their way into the industry.
Oh yeah.
And the foundation is being built with honorable people like yourself. But you're also wearing, 6 different hats along the way as like the foreman, the guy who's bringing in the concrete. You're every single person on the way there.
There's a lot of heavy lifting that's going. And I can only really speak to what's going on in the state of Wisconsin right now. I left Illinois years ago, and Illinois is they've got their own interesting politics and battles going on around this as well too. But with us, it's been a lot of heavy lifting by a lot of different people around the state. So my role, while I have the biggest school district that's currently involved in the state association, it's not just me who's doing kind of lifting like that. It's everybody, and it works out. It actually works out really well because we do have a lot of great adults who don't necessarily know all the games, and they realize that they're not going to be experts. You want to talk about a heavy lifting. Talk about a person who's asked to be a coach. We call them general managers. Ask them to general manage over 4 different games. They may know one game really well, but their weaknesses maybe are going to be likely in 3 other games, or they're not going to know all the games. So the role then becomes very different. The role of a general manager isn't so much to coach and tell kids what to do, because a lot of the times the kids know the games better than the adults do. So it's more a matter of harnessing all of that energy into a team and forming that team and being an advocate for the kids. Because again, we're not looking to develop professional gamers here. Again, we're just trying to give them a positive and pro-social experience around something that they love to do.
But will that agenda pivot at some point, do you believe, toward building professional gamers? Or
I really don't. In fact, I see our role as being as educators and kind of not being in those professional ranks as even being more important. And the reason is there's a tendency right now, because again, the story this weekend, 16-year-old gets $3 million for playing Fortnite, won more than Tiger Woods. Okay, that's great. He's the exception to the rule. Okay, the space now is seen with dollar signs. And what's really the ugly part of it, and one of my biggest worries, is that a 14-year-old or a 15-year-old who's a really good streamer, has a high profile, high ranking, may be subject to exploitation. And it would be easier to exploit a child in this space if an educator isn't in there or a parent's not involved in it either. And so it's really important that as educators, we're attuned to what our kids are doing in this space and really trying to understand it and step into it. And that's hard for educators to do. And the reason why it's so hard for some educators to do is because they are not the experts. Teachers are used to being experts. They're used to having control. They're used to being able to tell you what to do and how to do it. And in this case, you have to listen to the kids. The kids are gonna be better coaches than you. They're gonna have some really good ideas. This becomes a lot more of a partnership than what traditional education has been in the past. And so again, I don't see the shift, because the focus is never about professional gaming. I mean, if the kid becomes a professional gamer, that's a great thing. We're not going to stop it, but again, this is about getting kids together and promoting, like I said, the 5 different ideals that we had earlier. The mental health component is a huge one, really, with this too, and the importance of play. Those are probably some of the biggest components that we have, at least in my area, because we do have a mental health crisis in the city of Racine, where we do have kids who do have high adverse childhood experience scores. We call them ACE scores, where an adverse childhood experience could be anything from a divorce to homelessness to having to move suddenly, couch surfing, abuse. Any of those things can total up into an adverse childhood experience. And the two ways that you push against the two ways that you push against a mental health crisis that's in your town is, number one is with a positive adult interaction, and the other one is with play. And if professional gamer pops out of that, fantastic. But the other things are going to come much, much more important to be first.
So, yeah, I worry about that being overreaching. But then again,
what do you mean by that?
Meaning that how much of it is the school district's duty to raise the child, especially in today's day and age where most parents are contemplating or even thinking about removing their children from the school district, to be no school or homeschooled over having themselves institutionalized by the school district. Another thing
you said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to clear something up here.
Yeah.
You said institutionalized by the school district?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Well, you just talked about the mental health structure, and that
Correct.
the school district would deem how a parent should or should not raise their child, or in addition, the direction in which they should ultimately find happiness or peace in their life.
I think you're kind of misunderstanding what we're talking about when we're talking about what a mental health crisis is and how we go about fixing that or working with students in that space.
Okay.
And so let me try to put it this way. I am, as part of my job, I'm a mandatory reporter with the state. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if I suspect that there's any kind of abuse, whether it's physical or mm-hmm. verbal abuse, I'm a mandatory reporter and I have to report that. Mm-hmm. I work with children on a day-to-day basis. Me personally, I work with my two class of kids that I work with are high anxiety white girls and expelled black boys. Mm-hmm. And so I take umbrage when you ask me about the institutionalization or about me making a decision. This education is really truly a partnership. Mm-hmm. And if you don't understand that,
I want to also say I'm not individualizing you, and I think that's an important thing to do. Also, I think that something else I was going to mention is that how much is the communicology department being involved with this from a public relations standpoint?
The what department?
The communicology department or the communications department of school districts, from the speech and pathology departments being involved and helping students develop their voice. And so I think that that's another key portion I would be.
Well, a lot of this is about a lot of this. What we're doing with esports is about helping students to develop their voice. Mm-hmm. A lot of kids, we talk to them about, watch your digital footprint. I mean, I oversee the other part of my job is I oversee all the librarians in the school district, and we have to do internet safety, which is fine. But the message is usually lost on kids because it's not done in authentic ways. And mm-hmm. You can tell them till you're blue in the face, beware your digital footprint, careful what you're posting online. You don't want to necessarily do that. You want to make sure that you're taking care of what you post because it could impact your future. And we saw that even, a couple of years ago or last season, actually, seemed like every time a kid was called up to the major leagues, their Twitter history was being laid out. I mean, Josh Hader, who's a pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, a lot of people forgotten some of the controversy around his Twitter post from when he was in high school. What we're doing is we're engaging kids in authentic ways now and saying, hey, here's this thing that you love doing. You are intrinsically motivated to do this. Let's take that and let's actually help you develop your brand. Let's actually help you develop your voice in this space. Let's think about what college can mean for you. And the great thing about the college scholarship opportunities, what we're finding is that there are several different universities doing this, whether small or large, that are different fits for kids. The one thing that's going to be coming out, though, in the next couple of years that is going to shine a very bright spotlight on this, because there are some schools that are so focused on winning and prestige, because, and I don't know the reasons why, because it is, but is the graduation rates. I look carefully at what college teams right now are doing with graduation rates, just like you would with a college football team or a college basketball team. There's prestige in a high graduation rate, and then there's also issues, and you can tell when kids are not graduating from programs what to expect. So it's going to be, there's a lot of similarities there between traditional sports and esports as far as what graduation rates are going to look like in the next couple of years as well too. So there's a lot of ways to connect kids into different schools of what they want to accomplish and helping them find that direction.
Right. Since esports and I guess esports is a very individualistic mentality. You build your own brand long run, unless you join an organization. But even then, most of these competitive games are solo. We are starting to see, well, even for the $3 million that Booga did win, he won that in a solo match, not as like he did win it for the Sentinels, but then again, he could easily be bought and transferred to another organization within a matter of moments. Contracts, sort of what we're seeing with Ninja moving from Twitch to Mixer. You know, the dollar amount really does count ultimately. How does a program like yours find funding to afford to keep allowing kids to learn through esports?
Well, the best thing about what we're doing is that it is comparatively low cost. So you may think, there's a lot of high-end equipment that's got to come into this space. We are spending, we decided rather than building out our spaces in our own schools to instead thinking of this as like how you would bowling. You know, high schools have bowling teams. We're not going to build bowling alleys, right? We're going to go rent a lane. And what we did was, again, partnering with our friends at Not Your Parents' Basement, our community gaming space, we partnered with them and we rented the space out. So it's $24,000 for the space for the year for all 5 of our schools. We don't have any overhead as far as our technology costs. We don't have any overhead as far as, you know, having to pay IT department or anything like that. So we were very cost effective in that way. Again, especially when you're talking about a district where we did run an $11 million budget deficit for this year's budget that just got balanced. There's a lot to it that where we've had to find savings. But even if you're not a school like us that's lucky enough to have a gaming lounge in town, a game like League of Legends can run on a potato. That is the term that we like to use. You don't need a high-end system to run it. Overwatch, maybe you need a little bit more. But even organizations like the North American Scholastic Esports Federation, NASEF, which is they're a foundation that was funded by the Smooley Foundation. He's the owner of the Anaheim Ducks. They've got a partnership with UCI, so University of California, Irvine, which has one of the top esports teams, not just in the country, in the world. But they also have a fantastic research branch, Constance Steinkuhler. She's an amazing researcher. They're focused on gaming. There's supports from them as well too. So they do offer a lot of free professional development. They offer free clinics for coaches. They offer a lot of, like, if your school is struggling to find equipment, they've got organizations that help you find lower cost equipment to help you get started. Because there are a lot of sunk costs into this if you try to build out an arena from the start. So it's a matter of understanding and setting first, what do you want to do with this? Where do you want to be with this, and what do you want it to be? And labs don't just necessarily need to be, esports arenas. You can use them for graphic design classes. You could use them for, as an open lab, if you will. I've even thought about using our library spaces, because we do, in the state of Wisconsin, we have access to what's called common school funds, which would allow us then to purchase any technology that we need for our libraries, and turning our libraries kind of into the gaming lounges as well too. So there's a lot of good ways to fund this. In fact, one of the episodes I did on the Academy of Esports was specific to how do you fund your esports program?
Yeah. So all the competitions or the matches are internally within the school district, or do you also compete against external school districts? And is that only in the post-season tournament tournament time, or during the actual season, or how is it structured
Well, we're
entirely?
being part of the Wisconsin High School Esports Association. We have a schedule, and sometimes
Yeah.
we do play, schools in our own district, and then sometimes we're playing schools outside of the district as well too. Plus,
Hmm.
we have the open ability to play in invitationals, small tournaments. I know that the Walden School, which is one of our high schools, has gone to Robert Morris University several times to actually compete. And that's actually how one of our kids got a scholarship down there, $9,000 a year.
Hmm.
Was he went down there and competed that day and got to know some of the coaches, and they offered him the $9,000 a year scholarship to come there and play Overwatch. So there's a variety of different ways that kids can compete. Schools can choose to do as much with this or as little as this as they want to do.
Hmm.
They don't have to play in all, like we play in all 4 games, right? That the conference sanctions,
Hmm.
but we don't have to. If all we wanted to play was Overwatch, we could just focus on Overwatch. But again, we've got students who choose to want to play other things. The other thing we do as well that isn't sanctioned by the conference is we're working with Not Your Parents' Basement to have a a winter Madden, FIFA, NBA 2K tournament as well too, and that would be more of a city championship. So there's different ways that we can parse this out and do this, but it all is in the hopes of, like I said, redefining athletic culture and bringing kids together in ways that they haven't been brought together before.
Yeah, and so maybe we do talk about that now. So the misconception, or maybe the stigma towards the difference between an esports athlete and a professional gamer. I was recently playing Apex with some younger demographic, actually, 16 to like I think the older my other squad member was like 20 or something like that. Um, they were adamant that they did not want to. They didn't. They were, I think maybe it's partly society and partly probably parent pressure or peer pressure for them to not accept that there can be athleticism within esports.
Well, the term there is it's very weird. When I used to, and I don't say this anymore, especially when I'm talking about the kids that we're using. I mean, we're talking about professional, that's a different thing. But
Hmm.
I used to say esports athlete. And first of all, esports athlete is a very narrow definition, or gives a very narrow visual of what we're trying to do.
Hmm.
So that is for the kid who is playing the game.
Hmm.
And again, if you do it right, there was a story in the New York Times not too long ago. I think it said video games now is less pizza, more yoga.
Hmm.
What we're finding is that even though this is video games, the kids, if they want to be top
Hmm.
performers in this space, they do have to hydrate, get good sleep, and do a light to moderate amount of exercise just to keep their bodies and their minds right. We
Hmm.
know scientifically speaking that different types of activity trains the brain in different ways. So if you're a high intensity trainer or you're doing kind of CrossFit, that actually helps with problem solving, and so does weightlifting.
Hmm.
Aerobic training is going to help you to control your heart rate. If you're in a match, your heart rate can get anywhere from 160 to 180 beats per minute. And so when it gets like that, that's as much as a marathon runner is going to have their heart running, or a sprinter will. So you have to teach kids ways to moderate that. I remember watching some of our kids play in a match where they were down a player. They showed up with 5 that day. The other team had 6, and it was an Overwatch match.
Hmm.
And rather than forfeit, they said, we're going to play it out anyway. So they played 5-on-6. They actually won their first 2 matches. But what was fascinating to see was just how exhausted they looked by the third map. They went from being a very good communicating team to where they got tired, communication stopped, they started making mistakes. It is a grind when you're playing those matches. And so the term that I use instead when I'm talking about our kids who play video games on our esports teams, I call them scholar gamers. So there's still the scholastic component of that.
Hmm.
There's the gaming component, but a lot of the kids who come to us too aren't just going to be there for gaming. They're also there to do and learn how to be a shoutcaster or a data analyst. They're doing IT support. They're doing coaching. They're helping and doing scouting. They're helping with scouting. So we've got kids who have different roles other than just sitting there and playing the games themselves. So that's also, I guess, a big difference between a professional gamer and what we're doing. Professional gamers, they've got their game, they've got their role, they know what they're going to be doing. Sometimes that role may change, or they may be taken off team. But once they're taken off team, what are they doing then? In this case here, I've got kids who are free to explore different games or free to explore different roles within those games or around the ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, something that just came to mind, and I just want to hear your stance on this. But
Sure.
So from a collegiate standpoint, I think that one of the reasons why secondary schools and then your high schools and your junior schools are fearing promoting or creating a esports athlete is because the majority of colleges have not adopted esports into their athletic program, creating a barrier for them to be recognized within the NCAA.
Well,
so
that's fine.
But it isn't. It isn't. And from my experience within DreamHack, within South by Southwest Gaming, and speaking with professional gamers, they've had issues where they can't source their teammates. The only place for them to source them is through catfishing on the internet or some sort of mechanism that isn't through an institution, right, or another organization that seems bracketed. So
you're looking at this from a perspective of an outsider. In education, we are very happy that the NCAA is not involved in this space right now.
Mm-hmm.
The NCAA historically has become now a money organization that is not pro-student. They are pro making money. Mm-hmm. And if the NCAA could have figured out a way to allow kids who are already making money by streaming and they have their sponsorships and things like that, if they could have sorted a way to separate them from football players who are not allowed to do that, or basketball players who are not allowed to do any promotion or accept any outside money, the NCAA would have done that. But if they had come in and said, no, we're going to allow these kids to be gamers and collect their royalty checks off of their Twitch stream and be able to promote themselves in the ways that they're doing it for money and playing in outside tournaments, the NCAA would have had a much bigger deal to deal with. They already just got past a lawsuit that was brought by students at Northwestern University to unionize because these kids wanted to be paid for the service that they do. I mean, they generate tens of millions of dollars for the university, and they were being left out. So there is a this space right now. The NCAA has backed off it. They said they're not stepping into this, and these kids are. The NCAA is not going to be a farm system for professional teams. Professional teams are going to have to find their kids where they're finding them. And they're not just finding them at the collegiate ranks. I mean, they're finding these kids around the world. This is a completely different structure. We're trying to take old school mentality and old school methods of systems that are really not relevant right now in the space. I'm quite happy that the NCAA is backed off. And even though the NCAA is backed off, that hasn't kept schools like Boise State University. If you haven't listened to my interview with Dr. Chris Haskell, who's the coach of that team, I highly recommend checking that out, or listening to Mark Deppie at UCI. I interviewed him as well, too. We're still competing. We're still getting into these spaces. The North American Collegiate Esports Association is alive and well and kicking. And while it may not be a perfect entity as things stand right now, it has collected 150 universities, and the projected number that we're looking at in now, I guess, 4 years, is we're looking at 800 colleges and universities having esports programs. In fact, the one that is in my town, the technical college, which is Gateway Technical College, I'm working with them right now to consider how do they step into this space. Again, this is not just like starting up another football team. This isn't like adding another sport. There's a lot of planning that has to come into the space. And because it's not widespread right now, doesn't mean that it's not going to be in several years. When football started out in the early 1900s, I mean, the rules weren't even set right. I mean, people were getting literally killed on football fields. It took Teddy Roosevelt to call together 5 of the top college coaches, including Pop Warner, to bring them together to the White House to say, like, hey guys, we got to figure out what the rules are of this thing. People are actually getting killed, and I like this game, but you got to figure out what it's going to be. And it wasn't until that happened that that football became a accepted sport, and it didn't just happen overnight. It was controversial when football was brought to a college or university, especially in the 1910s, 20s, and 30s. It was a controversial undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
So
you talked about it from I'm looking at it from an outsider standpoint. My whole family comes from education and whatnot.
My dad's an aerospace engineer. He wouldn't want me fixing an airplane.
Right. And my question isn't about whether it's like a degrading or anything like that. It's more of like, why is it that the educational institution does not want to provide the opportunity for a student to earn income from being competing as an esports athlete, whether that is at a collegiate level, a high school level, or a professional level? There seems to be some sort of friction created that is pulling them away from it.
Nope, don't see it at all. We don't do anything to keep our kids from earning money streaming. In fact, it was funny, the presentation I gave to my board, my school board, about our esports progress that we've made in esports, was one of the board members actually stopped the meeting and said, hey, I just realized that I think my son is a Twitch streamer and he's sponsored by Slim Jim. It's there is no, we want kids to develop their brands. We want kids, the idea being that if a kid can make a bunch of money streaming and before they get out of high school, that's empowerment. That is saying, hey, you've developed your brand, you've developed a name for yourself, you've made a bunch of money even possibly doing it. That would be ideal. And think about that, where a kid doesn't have to take on college debt or even chooses not to go to college now that they've developed a social media following, or their brand is popular, or they've learned to become savvy in other ways in an industry where they can step right from their bedrooms or their basements or their offices where they're streaming and step into the space and be productive in it. So yeah, the NCAA stance is completely different than what the schools are saying. The NCAA is looked to as an organizational body that there was talk about them rubber stamping how they wanted things to happen and how things are going to get sanctioned. But that's apart from what the schools are doing. In fact, if you look at one of the biggest conferences in the United States, the Big Ten, they run a League of Legends tournament and they give scholarship money to kids. There's scholarship prize money in that, and that does not preclude those students from having a stream or being a professional gamer or anything like that.
Does that exclude schools that are not adopting their programs into the athletic department?
It's funny. Colleges, by and large, are not adopting it into athletics.
I know
they're putting it into student life. That hasn't really stopped kids from getting the supports that they need to be successful.
Well, from speaking with the University of Texas Longhorn Gaming president, it has limited their ability to exponentially grow. Being a part of the athletic department opens resources to branding, because the trademark for the Longhorn logo is inside the athletic department.
That to me that's on them if that's what they need or that's what they want, but that doesn't keep them from competing, and that doesn't keep them from being professional gamers. Again, if their focus is the games, or if they're focusing on being professionals, then that's on them.
I agree.
That's on them, man.
I agree with you in the moment right now. That seems to be the case. But as the esports industry is developing, and what I've noticed is that they're looking for brand recognition. They're working with non-endemic sponsors like Bud Light, Monster, Coca-Cola, all these big names, and they want to see that the athlete went to the University of Texas, he played for FaZe Clan, ... to get him to the next level of being an esports star. As far as like, if we want to be a professional gamer or we want to be an esports athlete, this is something that the sponsorship dollars, the branding and marketing decks are looking like nowadays.
That's up on the college and university. Like I said, there are Most of them are under student life,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not keeping kids from competing.
Mm-hmm.
That is not keeping them from developing their own brand. That's not keeping them from making professional contacts. I can understand that they're not getting access to maybe the Texas Longhorn logo,
Mm-hmm.
but again, that's a decision that has to be parsed out with the university. There's only
Mm-hmm.
one that I know well, actually, there's two that I know of now who have said we're taking this on as full-blown varsity. Is University of Wisconsin-Madison has said they were going to put it under varsity, but they really
Yep.
haven't done anything with it.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to the people, they basically took the Madison Gaming Club and kind of tried to rebrand it, but there really hasn't been anything that's come out of it.
Well,
The,
ironically, UT Dallas has brought the esports program into their athletic department.
well, I
However,
think UT Dallas is way different than University
mhm,
of Wisconsin-Madison. We're talking about
mhm.
the top tier state school in the Big Ten Conference. So that's
No, that's what I'm saying. I said ironically, UT Dallas has brought their in, but UT Austin, the
Oh,
Longhorns,
gotcha.
yes.
Yeah. So the other one, the one that's probably may have made the biggest splash, but I'm not sure yet because they still haven't officially launched yet because they're doing a ramp up and they're developing their space.
Hmm.
Is Marquette University in Milwaukee. Now they are, in theory, they are supposed to be the first varsity level Division I team that is putting full athletics behind it.
Hmm.
That, but again, they're still waiting on the launch. Now, what does varsity athletics gain you over clubs? Clubs is what you pointed out. Number one is definitely going to have the weight
Brand
of the
recognition.
athletic department branding, but that's also access, and this is part of the mental and physical health components of this is, having access to those trainers,
Hmm.
having
Yeah.
access to the tables, the food tables and things like that. If
Hmm.
you haven't watched the ESPN series Good Gamer yet, that has University of California, Irvine,
Yeah.
and you see how they eat, you see how they train, you
Hmm.
see how their experience is. It is not Doritos and sitting in dark rooms for long hours playing games. I mean,
Hmm.
this is practice schedules and talking about. When I looked at the food table that they were eating at, I had never seen so much salad on one table.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, you're right. There are different accesses to other things.
Hmm. And what is the agenda for the National Collegiate Esports Association as far as getting to that level? Do you have any insight into that?
I don't. They just had their. I know they just had their big uh, powwow a couple weeks ago.
Hmm.
They do have a. They finally have an actual board. I think they went from advisory board and they now formalized into an actual board of directors made up of different coaches around the United States.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but again, right now, it doesn't take much to create an association or to create a league on a nationwide level. And you could
Yeah.
basically set one up on your computer in an afternoon with the right domain name and the right branding. And
Hmm.
you too could set up a conference and start to try to attract high schools or colleges even.
Yeah.
It as you said earlier, it's Wild West, and we're kind of at the forefront at it. And it's not pretty all the time.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's ugly, and sometimes we're still experimenting and figuring out. But what we're ultimately trying to do, and this is the important thing, is we are trying to take things that kids love doing, and we're saying, hey, you love doing that. We're going to support you in that, and we want to help make it the best experience it can be.
Hmm. I think that the one big thing is that we're all coming from different industries as gamers, and we're trying to speak one language that's being developed, as we're going. We're trying to build the airplane as it's flying,
Oh,
I've
that's
been told.
yeah, that happens. That happens all the time. I mean, you're not going to get this. You're not going to get this perfect. Yeah, there is a very much, I guess you could say, a rush to implementation going on in this
Hmm.
because there are dollars involved, and that's the nice thing about having the association that we have in Wisconsin is that we are not dollar driven, that we are the educators who are actually working with these kids on a day to day basis, and we do ultimately have their best interests at heart.
Hmm. Well, we're always going to be competing against our elders because they're always going to be wanting to, kind of dictate as to how it should and shouldn't be done. But I would not discourage any of the youth to make or pave their own way.
Oh
Even
yeah,
if
No. We in fact, like I said earlier, we are not the experts in this space,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to the games.
Hmm.
Um, my friend Jay Collins, actually is runs a team, an all-girls school in Cleveland.
Hmm.
They started off with League of Legends, found out none of the girls liked that game, so they went and asked, "What games do you like?" And they ended up with a completely set of different games. And what they decided was, with their experience, was they were going to rotate their games every 9 months. So there's not this, I guess you could say, professional mindset around building professional players. They're looking at this as experiential and saying, "Hey, we can do all these great things and enjoy doing it
Hmm.
in different ways." So, all right.
Yeah. And then, so then I guess last but not least, uh, the situation with Ninja,
Hmm.
he's in right now where an organization would want to move you from place to place, um, and you would be uh, going from your school district to another school district. What do you advise like a kid, a young child who's maybe moving around or whatnot? How do they find their space? And is this another thing? Do you know of other places for them to kind of get into sort of like an ecosystem like yours?
So if it's not, that's the beauty thing about it. As you talked about, this is all new.
Hmm.
There are groups and associations. The place I would start with anybody, if you're looking at jumping into this space right now, and you're even a student or a parent who's interested in this, look to the North American Scholastic Esports Federation, NASEF, NASEF. They have everything that's free, and they've got everything. Again, this isn't just coming from some random organization. This comes with actual research behind it from the University of California, Irvine. A lot of it coming from the professor who is the leader in this space, Constance Steinkuhler. And that is a one-stop shop, if you will, to find how to get things going. And even if it's just needing professional development or helping to get the club started,
Hmm.
they've got all those things. And they run tournaments as well too. Everything's free.
Hmm.
Very well run, very professional organization. That's where I would start.
Okay. Well, if you have anything that you want to promote, I've got your social medias on screen for those of you who are listening. I'll have it in the description. How can people find you? Where can they look for you to get some information?
Sure, you can go to you can look up the Academy of Esports podcast. You can find it on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify. It's pretty much anywhere you can grab a podcast. SoundCloud. You can also the only other spot that I don't think you have listed there is my personal Twitter account that I've been running much longer. It's not just esports stuff, but everything else. I
Hmm.
can be found at Jim O'Hagan. That's at JIMOHAGAN.
Awesome. All right. Have a great day. Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Trent.